UFC Fight Night, Aspinall versus Tybura, full card predictions. Starting with the first fight of the night, working our way up. As always, we have Jafel Filo and Daniel Barres. This one, I'm going to go with Daniel Barres here as a slight underdog. Now, the one concern I have with Barres, if you can see on the screen here, is he is kind of an old flyweight, or an older flyweight at 34, making his UFC debut in front of a big crowd here in London. So there is a slight cause of concern there. But I think Daniel Barres he puts combinations together very well. I think he's the overall better striker in this fight. And I think if he doesn't engage in the grappling, if he keeps us on the feet, which I believe he can do, he should be able to defeat Jafel Filo. Filo, he almost submitted Muhammad Makayev. That's the big thing that people have been talking about is the knee bar that he almost caught Makayev with. And to be honest, he almost anyone else would have tapped to that. But Makayev, showed his toughness, showed his grit, and ended up, winning the fight soon after with a rear naked choke there. The thing with Barres is though he fought Carlos Hernandez to a split. Carlos Hernandez is a very technical fighter, very well-rounded fighter in general. And we've seen Carlos Hernandez have success in the UFC. We've seen him, put some good work in. And the fact that Barres, looked pretty good in the striking against him, and in my opinion, at a lot of points in that fight, outstruck him. I think he can certainly do the same with Filo. So outside of a random submission or Barres slipping or something like that, because he did slip and get controlled, by Hernandez for a long period of time. If he doesn't make any mistakes and he stays on the feet, I think he can piece up Filo and win this fight. So give me Daniel Barres to win this one. Moving right along, this fight is awful. Absolutely awful. I don't know how this is a UFC level fight, but we all know how it is. Bruno Brazil and Shauna Bannon. Oh boy, we're in for a treat here, aren't we? God. Bruno Brazil, I'm gonna pick to win. I honestly don't care about this fight in any way whatsoever, and neither should you. No one should actually put any money. If you guys, none of you should even think about putting money on this fight. For those of you that like to bet, I couldn't even imagine betting on a fight like this. I don't know how anyone could willingly put money on either one of these women, especially Shauna Bannon. But I am going to go with Bruna Brazil. Her last fight, was a loss to Denise Gomes, but as we saw with Denise, she just had a 20-second knockout win. So Bruna Brazil getting knocked out by her in the second round isn't the worst look. Yasmin Yergui was a minus 350 favorite or something crazy like that, and Denise Gomes just went out there and destroyed her in 20 seconds. So that's not the worst look. Denise Gomes has massive power, and from what I've seen from Shauna Bannon, I watched her last fight. I wasn't really interested in watching her against trash can opponents, but I did watch her last fight against a 6-4 opponent, and she looked like she was getting clocked a little bit. I'm not saying like she was getting destroyed, but like she was getting, she was getting hit pretty good, by a 6-4 opponent, and it's just like, I mean, Bruna Brazil. I hate that her hands are down and she has that like weird style. That's just she's very open, but Shauna Bannon going to take advantage of that? I would doubt it. In my opinion, I don't know if she will. The UFC definitely wants Shauna Bannon to win. I mean, let's be honest here. Ireland fighter, 5-0, fighting on the London card. Like the UFC probably want her to win, but I think Bruna Brazil should win this fight. Um, it's a terrible fight, though. It really is. I'm not going to even get more into it. I just think Bruna Brazil should be the one to win here because at least she's fought a slightly better level of competition, and she did have a nasty head kick knockout on the Contender Series. So, for that, it's like she does have at least a bit of finishing upside here. Um, Shauna Bannon, her last three fights have all went the distance against low level competition. So Who knows what's going to happen here? I sure don't, but I'll go with Bruno Brazil. Next is Chris Duncan and Yanel Ashmaz. Um, I'm going to go with Chris Duncan. Now, I'll say this. I know Yanel has been a very popular underdog pick all week. I've seen countless people, saying Chris Duncan should not be a favorite. Yanel is going to go in there and knock him out. Duncan's chinny. Look, I'm not saying that Chris Duncan isn't chinny a little bit. I'm not saying that he has a great chin, or I'm not saying that he's the best defensive striker, because he isn't. But I don't know how people can look at you now and think just because he knocked out Sam Patterson, a guy that's 6'3" at lightweight, a guy that's keeps his chin high up in the air. He got a good, it's a good knockout. He got a very good knockout against Sam Patterson. He hit him with a clean shot, put his lights out cold. And I think him putting Sam Patterson's lights out is the reason he's even, the reason people are saying that he's going to win this fight. If he didn't put his lights out, and I know there's a bunch of the what if game. We can play the what if game forever, but you know, it, had he not found that knockout in a minute, would he even be, a slight underdog here? Would Chris Duncan be like a -200? I think Chris Duncan has the wrestling advantage. I think he can out wrestle if he needs to. I think he probably will mix in the wrestling. I think he'll strike for a little bit, and if he starts having a little bit of trouble, if starts cracking him, I think he can wrestle. Hasn't fought the level of competition that Chris Duncan has. Chris Duncan, if you look through his record, he's actually fought a decent level of He really has. Like, you can't say anything about his level of competition because he's fought the much better opponents for sure. Fought the much better opponents. Omar Morales is a UFC veteran. Beat him. Omar Morales has 7 UFC fights, 3 and 4 in the UFC, but still a UFC caliber opponent. He beat Charlie Campbell on the Contender Series. I know got into a little bit of trouble in that fight, but Charlie Campbell is a good fighter. And then his last Contender Series fight was against Slava Claus, where he got knocked out bad. But Slava Claus is a different level of striker. For those that know, Borshev is a very, very dangerous striker. The striking coach over at Team Alpha Male. So, not the worst look there. And he's 10-1. 10-1. And if you look at Chris Duncan, he's had a ton of amateur fights. More experience than I think he has the better wrestling, training out of a better gym. Chris Duncan's out of American Top Team. That has to be mentioned. I've seen Duncan getting training in with, he used to get training in with Masvidal, getting in training with like Grant Dawson, like those type of guys. If you're training with them, you know that your MMA game is getting better and better and better. These guys are very, very close in age. It's not like one has a significant advantage as far as being much younger. Yanel's 28, Chris Duncan's 30. I just think Duncan, if he doesn't get knocked out here, I think he wins this fight over 3 rounds. And I do think this fight goes the distance more often than not. I think if there is a finish, it'll probably be like a knockout for Yanel, but we've seen Chris Duncan get into trouble before and, work his way out of it. So I'm going with Chris Duncan to get the win by a decision. Next is Ketlin Vieira versus Pani Kianzad. Another one where I don't really have that much interest in, but it is a better fight than Sean O'Bannon and who even was that? Bruno Brazil, terrible fight. This one's a little bit better though. Ketlin Vieira and Pani Kianzad. I'm gonna go with Ketlin Vieira just for the sole fact that one, she's fought a better level of competition. Pani Kianzad lost to Raquel Pennington. If you look through her last 5, Betch Correia, Sajari Eubanks, Alexis Davis, Raquel Pennington, and Lena Landsberg. Now let me discuss the last fight first, or the last fight she had. Lena Landsberg, that fight was a year ago. Lena Landsberg was 40, I think 40 or 41, might have been 40 years of age. And Lena Landsberg, for those of you that saw that fight, Lena Landsberg dropped Pani Kianzad, dropped her on her ass with an elbow. Now, if Lena Landsberg at 40 is dropping you, and Lena Landsberg sucks. If she's dropping you, imagine what Ketlin Vieira could do. I mean, Ketlin Vieira, look at her last five. Sajara Eubanks, I know Penny Kanzat also fought Sajara, so I'm not going to say much there. Yana Santos lost to her. Misha Tate, Holly Holm split decision. Um, that was our. I thought Holly Holm won the fight, but Ketlin Vieira did have some close moments. Almost submitted Holly Holm, almost choked her out. If you guys remember that, and then lost a split to Raquel Pennington in a close fight. All in all, I think Ketlin Vieira's fought the better level of competition. I think she's looked better in her fights. And Pannie Kianzad, I can't trust Pannie Kianzad to win a fight against a girl like Ketlin Vieira. You know, anything can happen in women's MMA. It's not something that again, if you guys are thinking about betting on this fight, don't do it because there's obviously a chance of the underdog winning in every women's fight, regardless of who it is. We've seen it time and time again. Women's underdogs who nobody expects to win go out there and win. So I wouldn't tell you guys to bet it, but I do think Ketlin Vieira is going to win the fight. She has more experience against the higher levels competition, in my opinion. Um, been in main event slots before as well, so I think fighting on the prelims, she's not going to be too much pressure on her. I think she'll be fine here to get a win, and also 5 rounds versus 3 rounds, she'll probably have good enough cardio to go a hard three as well. So give me Ketlin Vieira there. Next is a weird fight because it's Brian Barberena and Mahmoud Muradov. I'm going with Muradov. Look, why is Brian Barberena fighting at middleweight? Um, I don't get it. I seriously don't get why Brian Barberena is moving up to middleweight. He's not like he looks very like he has a very mediocre physique at welterweight, and now he's moving up to middleweight. It's like it's not like the dude's like struggle. Is Brian Barberena really struggling to make welterweight? Is that the reason he moved up? I don't know. I don't expect him to win this fight against Mahmoud Muradov. However, I mean, as much as Muradov should win, and I'm picking Muradov to win, we've seen Brian Barberena, or I mean, I'm sorry, we've seen Muradov lose to GM3, which is by far one of the worst looks. If you're a prospect and you're losing to Gerald Mearshart, all respect to Mearshart, but like if you're a prospect losing to him, you're not going to be a champion. Let's just be honest. No champion level fighter is getting beaten by Gerald Mearshart, and getting it's just not something. If you're getting outstruck by Gerald Mearshart, it's even worse. However, Brian Barberena moving up in weight after losing his last two to RDA and Gunnar Nelson. Let me talk about the RDA fight. Getting out grappled by a guy like RDA, RDA, he is a very good grappler, but Brian Barberena, that's a lightweight that he fought. A lightweight RDA who moved up to welterweight. It's not like RDA is like a huge guy. Mahmoud Muradov's a much, much bigger guy. Muradov's going to be the bigger, stronger guy, should be, have more power, should have the better striking and grappling. I do expect Muradov to mix in the wrestling here. I think that would be a smart idea. Getting in a firefight with Barberena probably is not a good idea at all. Um, but yeah, Muradov, his last fight was against Caio Borralho, and he did not get submitted against Caio Borralho. And I think Brian Barberena would easily get submitted, and I mean easily get submitted by Caio Borralho. So I do think Muradov should have a grappling edge here, should have a striking edge. I think he's better everywhere. Barberena is a tough dude. So if Muradov, completely gasses after going for the finish in round one and if Mahmoud Muradov loses, just cut him out of the sport forever. If you lose to a guy, and if you lose to Brian Barberena at 185, Mahmoud Muradov, you deserve to get cut and never fight again. So Muradov should win the fight. Brian Barberena, he somehow beat Robbie Lawler. I mean, it makes no sense because Lawler went out there and knocked out Nico Price in 30 seconds, but he loses to Barberena. It's just how the sport goes, but Muradov should win this one. Next fight is Mick Parkin and Jamal Pogues. I gotta go with Pogues, although Would I really be surprised if Mick Parkin goes out there and wins? No, because Jamal Pogues is it's just one of those guys where you can't trust him. But Mick Parkin has fought nobodies, and I mean nobodies. Look at his record. His record, he's fought cans. 1-10. Look at I'm gonna read off the records of his opponents that he's fought so far. 1-10, 2-17, 2-3, 7-7, 6-9, and then a 5-0 Eduardo Neves on the Contender Series, which was I guess a pretty solid win. I mean, that was the only like decent win of his career so far. Besides that, he's been fighting bums, and I mean absolute trash can bums. So with Mick Park, and it's like you got to wonder why. You got to wonder why he's fighting that low level of competition. You know, although he did win on the Contender Series against a decent, decent opponent, decent prospect. Why is he fighting? Absolutely. I'm not like. It's not like he's fighting guys that are like 6-2 or 6-3. Like he's fighting 2-17 guys. Like why? Does he not? Does his coaches not believe in him? Do his coaches think he's not on that level, or did they think he wasn't on that level previously? I don't know. Um, it's weird though because the guy trains with Aspinall. The guy trains with Aspinall, and Aspinall, I believe, is I'll also get into Aspinall at the end of the video, but I think Aspinall is possibly a future champion in the sport. I think Aspinall is very, very good, very well rounded, uh, and he's training with him. And Parkin, it's weird. It really is weird to think about. But on the side of Pogues, I haven't really been the most impressed with Pogues. I mean, he beat Josh Parisian in his last fight, which is like it's Josh Parisian. It's not really the most impressive win. Um, wins on the Contender Series. The one thing about Pogues is like he will mix in the wrestling. He'll mix in wrestling. He's got decent boxing, decent leg kicks. He's not a bad fighter. He got submitted by Alex Polizzi a few years ago, but I don't really see Mick Parkin submitting him. I think the longer this fight goes, I would have to imagine Pogues is probably going to look better and better because has Parkin even got out of the first round in his entire career? I don't believe so. I think all of his he has been around two twice, but it's not like McParkin's been he's never been the distance. So if it goes to distance, Pogues I would imagine would be the better fighter over three. All of Parkin's fights have finished inside the distance. It would surprise me if Mick Parkin goes out there and finishes a guy like Jamal Pogues. And if he does finish Jamal Pogues, I would give him a lot of credit. I would say Mick Parkin's a real prospect if he can go out there and finish Jamal Pogues. So, I'll say that, but I got to go with the guy that's fought the better competition, a little bit more experienced fighter, over double the professional fights. And, could Parkin, like I said, could Parkin go out there and win? I mean, we've seen him, wrestle in the Contender Series, get a win. Um, we've seen him look pretty good in the grappling against, the low, bad opponents, to be quite honest with you. So if he goes out there and looks good in the grappling or, just beats up Jamal Pogues and finishes him, I'd be like, all right, this guy's pretty good. But from what I've seen so far, I have to go Pogues just simply for the fact that he's fought the better guys and he's been, 3 rounds in the UFC. So I'll slightly go with Jamal Pogues, but I mean, it's a heavyweight fight that's kind of a regional level fight, as far as I'm concerned. So who knows? Next is Mark Diakase and Joel Alvarez. Whew. Um, Give me Joel Alvarez, and the way I see this fight playing out from the tape I've watched on Diakase, I think he's a solid striker. But the problem I have with him is he thinks he's a wrestler nowadays. And if he thinks he's a wrestler against Joel Alvarez, I don't think it'll work out too well for him. I think more than likely, Diakase will probably shoot takedowns, or try to mix in the takedowns. Alvarez will pressure him, and if Alvarez, the strategy I would implement, and these guys are almost the exact same age. I didn't even notice that until now. They're almost like they're almost born the exact same time. But no, from what I see, I think Alvarez will pressure Diakase. I think he'll try to throw, he throws power on the feet, Alvarez. He looked really good against Thiago Moises, destroyed him on the feet. I think if Alvarez pressures Diakase is a better striker than Moises, but if Alvarez, just the size that he has, if he pressures Diakase, starts trying to, wear him down on the feet, I think Diakase will shoot a sloppy takedown. I mean, Diakase's been rocked before and shot bad takedowns against Rafael Alves. That fight I watched, Diakase got rocked with a jab, and then he shot a bad takedown and got submitted, and he tapped immediately. And Martia Casey got submitted twice by guillotine, once against Alves and once against Dan Hooker. Shot a poor takedown against Hooker and got submitted. And I think Joel Alvarez has very good guillotines. I think he's, a very dangerous submission threat against a guy like Mark Casey, who probably will look to wrestle a little bit. I've seen pictures on his Instagram of him training, um, I believe at like a wrestling academy or something like that. So I would imagine Mark Casey will probably try to wrestle or mix in the wrestling here, because Alvarez has been he got ground and pounded terribly by Armin Sarukian. Armin Sarukian butchered his face. I mean, completely bloodied him up. That was a disgusting, disgusting loss to have. And when I say disgusting loss, I don't mean like it's a bad loss. I mean like just the way he got finished was just brutal. Armin Sarukian's one of the best in the division, so I'm not going to hold it against him, but I am going to say like he got bloodied and beaten to a pulp. I don't think Diakase is that level of grappler. I think if Diakase shoots, Alvarez could snatch up the guillotine because Diakase, though his two submission losses of his career both have been by guillotine. Um, and I just think overall Alvarez is the type of guy that will push forward, will try to bring the fight to Diakase. And for some reason, I just see Alvarez, pushing the pace on Diakase, Diakase getting a little bit uncomfortable. And when Diakase gets uncomfortable, he tries to shoot, he tries to wrestle. And I don't think it's going to turn out well if he tries to shoot a takedown on Alvarez. I think Alvarez will pull guillotine, and I think he'll get it. So I'm going to go with Joel Alvarez by guillotine. Not the most, what do you call it? Not the most bold prediction. A lot of people are kind of predicting the same thing, but I really do see Alvarez winning this fight unless Diakase goes out there and just, avoids any, like, if he gets on top and, doesn't get submitted, obviously he's going to win the fight, but I just think it's easier said than done. I think Alvarez has really good jiu-jitsu. He has like almost all of his wins by submission. Uh, 16 wins by submission, so very dangerous. And I think he can definitely do some good work in the grappling against a guy like Dick Casey. So give me Alvarez there. Next fight is Danny Roberts and Johnny Parsons. Oh man, another one where it's like, who the hell do I pick? I mean, on one side you got Danny Roberts, who's you know been knocked out 4 times in his career. Most recently by Jack Della Maddalena, which isn't a bad loss to have. Um, Although we have seen Jack Della Maddalena look more human in his last fight, but that was against a guy who, I believe was, saucing a little bit. I believe definitely was on something because what guy can shoot, 20 takedowns in at welterweight in a single fight and still continue to push? Regardless of that, in this one, I'm going to have to ever so slightly pick Roberts just because Johnny Parsons has been out for, I believe, is it 2 years? Almost 2 years. And his last fight, he did not win. He did not win his last fight on the Contender Series. That was a disgusting robbery, one of the worst robberies possibly ever. Not ever, but it was a bad, bad robbery. I don't understand how you can give that fight to Johnny Parsons. It was terrible, terrible decision. Um, I don't understand. I really don't. That was a clear Solomon Renfro win. And Renfro had actually, I believe Renfro's last fight was against Al Salawi in the PFL, and he knocked him out. So Renfro's been, doing pretty well. So good for Renfro. He deserves, deserves to be signed to a good organization and fight some good competition. And he is doing pretty good. So happy for him, but for Parsons, he does not deserve to be in the UFC, in my opinion. Could he find a knockout against a chinny Danny Roberts? Possibly, but I mean, he hasn't fought in 2 years. Danny Roberts is the more active guy. Danny Roberts has fought how many times in the UFC now? He's fought 13 UFC fights, and this is a pick'em. I mean, the only way I see Johnny Parsons winning is by knockout. If he doesn't knock out Danny Roberts, do I see him winning a decision? I doubt it. Um, I don't know. I just think someone must know something. I know Danny Roberts is 36. I know he's been chinned before. I know Johnny Parsons is the Muay Thai coach at Syndicate. Uh, but in all honesty, like, let's be real, guys. Johnny Parsons, 8-3, should not have won his last fight against Danny Roberts, who's 13 fights in the UFC, fought a ton of pretty good level competition. If you look through his record, I mean, JDM, Francisco Trinaldo, Ramazan Ameev, um, was Michelle Pereira, who is fighting Wonder Boy next week. So that's a really interesting fight. I'll get to breaking that down eventually, but he's fought a lot of guys. I mean, a lot of his opponents were not like amazing UFC level fighters. Most of his opponents weren't like top guys that Danny Roberts fought. But it's not like Johnny Parsons has fought anyone either. I mean, for being striking coach at Syndicate, look at his fights. Solomon Renfro didn't win. Ricardo Chavez, 7-4, 10-4. Like, he's fought okay guys, but not UFC level talent. Um, yeah, I think Danny Roberts, if he doesn't get knocked out, I think he's going to take this one. So I'll slightly lean Danny Roberts to get it done. Also in the UK, so maybe that'll help him a little bit. Who knows? Now we have the headliner of the prelims up next, and it is one of my favorite fights on the card. Very good fight. A fight that's kind of flying under the radar, I believe. Davy Grant versus Daniel Marcos. I'm going to say right away, um, I'm going with Daniel Marcos, and I could be dead wrong on this, but I'm just going to say it as I believe. I think Daniel Marcos is an excellent prospect. From what I've seen from Daniel Marcos, I think he's the real deal. Um, Now, it kind of worries me for me saying that because he's 14-0. He's undefeated. He's fighting Davy Grant, who's a dangerous. His nickname is Dangerous, and he is very dangerous. I mean, we've seen Davy Grant find submissions. We've seen him knock guys out. We've seen Davy Grant do some crazy stuff in there. However, Daniel Marcos is so fluid in his striking, so technical. Mixes up the kicks well. Very clean with his combinations. He made his Contender Series fight, Brandon Lewis, made it look easy, made Simon Oliveira look easy, and those guys aren't really the level of competition that David Grant has fought. David Grant's fought, Jonathan Martinez, knocked him out. Marlon Chito Vera, one of the best in the division. Adrian Yanez lost a split to him in a close fight. Luis Smoka, all right. But then Rafael Sunsao, who is old, but a Sunsao still, it's Rafael Sunsao, still like a very good fighter. The only thing, though, is Daniel Marcos, 7 years younger, is improving fight to fight, improving, drastically. And I just think Daniel Marcos is so clean. I think if Davy Grant can't find a finish, which I'm not saying it's impossible, but I just think if he can't find a finish against Daniel Marcos, I think Marcos will probably just be the more technical fighter and just win a decision, um, just by picking apart Davy Grant. And I'm not going to say picking apart like destroying Davy Grant. I think Davy Grant's always live to stay in fights and make fights competitive and make fights close. But I just think Marcos is He hits hard. He's found knockouts before. Um, Davy Grant is, he didn't look amazing before the submission against the Sun Sao. He was losing the fight. I don't know. I feel like it's one of those where it's a passing of the torch type of situation in a way, um, where Davy Grant, has looked very good against, good competition, but Daniel Marcos, I just feel like is that guy that's he just, to me, from what I've seen, he's just very good. He really just is. Um, could Davy Grant kill the hype? I mean, Davy Grant has killed the hype of some guys before. I mean, Jonathan Martinez, perfect example. But I'm gonna have to go with Daniel Marcos until we see Daniel Marcos exposed. I can't pick against him, at least in this fight. Maybe if he's fighting like a really high level guy, I would pick against him. Not that David Grant is. I think David Grant is definitely high level, but until Daniel Marcos fights a guy where I'm like, all right, he might get exposed here. I just don't think David Grant's that guy. So Daniel Marcos for me in this one. Moving on to the main card, the first fight of the main card is Lerone Murphy versus Josh Kulibau. I'm going to go with Josh Kulibau here to start the main card. I think Josh Kulibau is being a little bit underrated. I think people kind of overrate Lerone Murphy a little bit. Not that he's a bad fighter. I think Lerone Murphy is very good. I just think people think higher of him than I do. I thought he was going to win against Gabriel Santos, and he, technically won, but it was a very competitive fight. Could have won either way, and that was against a 10-0 Santos who went on to get knocked out, get starched by David Onama, who does have power and is pretty good. But Lerone Murphy, if you look at his last five, Zubair Tukhugov won a split, got dropped in that fight though. That was a while ago. Beat Ricardo Ramos. That's a very good win. Douglas Silva de Andrade, another good win. That was 2.5 years ago though. Hasn't been the most active. Is getting back in there after the Santos fight, but again, that Santos fight was not the most impressive fight for Murphy. Makwan Amir Khani out wrestled him for the first round, and then the second round, gassed out, shot a lazy takedown and got kneed in the face and put out cold. Kulibau, um, it's not like he's like the most active guy, but I mean, if you look at his first fight in the UFC, up a weight class, lose to Jalen Turner, no shame. Goes to a split against Charles Jourdain, beats Shylon Nurdenbeke, beats Sungwoo Choi. That shouldn't have even been a split. And then beats Melsik Bagdasarian. I believe that was a slip on the side of Melsik, but it just shows that Kulibau is very opportunistic. I think he really is a guy that if he finds an opening, he'll take it regarding the grappling, regarding the striking. I think he's a little bit more dangerous than Lerone Murphy. I know Murphy does have some finishes in the UFC, but I feel like Kulibau is just a guy that's he's that dog. You know what I mean? He's a scrapper. He's the more the dog in this fight, and I just think Lerone Murphy being the favorite isn't really accurate in my opinion. I think this should honestly be a pick 'em. I think this should be like a -110 on both sides. I think Kulibau being an underdog is actually not a bad look. If you're I'm not going to tell anyone to like bet on this could go either way, but I do think Kulibau should be right up there with Murphy as far as the odds go. So I'm gonna go with Kulibau here. Murphy's also shown. I don't think Kulibau's gonna like go out and just wrestle for 15 minutes. I don't think that's gonna happen. But we have seen Murphy out grappled in the past, so you know it is a winnable fight for Kulibau, especially at these odds. So I'm gonna take him to win. Plus, something that I also want to mention is Australia. I'm not sure how much any of you buy into this, but Australia has been looking very good as of recent. Um, I shouldn't have ever doubted Volkanovski. I mean, he destroyed Yair. I mean, Yair had some good moments. He was actually looking pretty good in the third round, but him, Ursag, I mean, JDM, I know he had a close fight, but like a lot of these Australian guys are just looking better and better and better. So I'll say that that trend continues with Colby Bell. Next fight is Jai Herbert and Fares Ziam. I'm going to go with Fares Ziam, the smile killer, to beat Jai Herbert. Um, is it just me, or are these guys kind of similar, but Fares Ziam's 10 years, nearly 10 years younger? I think these guys are actually like fairly similar in a way. I just think Fares Ziam's slightly better, and he's also much younger, so he's going to be improving quicker. I think Jai Herbert probably has more power, but for Siam is very, I think he's got good striking. He dropped Mikhail Figlak. He, out-grappled Mikhail Figlak. That was a good win from him. He looked very good in that fight. Jai Herbert's last fight was against Ludwig Klein. Went to a majority decision. Kyle Nelson, I'm not really that high on Kyle Nelson. Got destroyed by Ilya Taporia. I mean, I will say in that Taporia fight, he did, rock Taporia really bad with a head kick. But Taporia is a featherweight. Taporia is not fighting at lightweight. Taporia was, and Taporia put his lights out. Like he starched him badly, and I mean terrible. Like Herbert was out cold there. Um, so could Faresiam find a finish here? I guess it's possible. I definitely don't want to say it's impossible that Ziam can find a finish. I think this fight will probably go the distance, though. Um, both guys are tough. Jai Herbert, he does have a little bit of power himself, but he has been knocked out before. Faresiam got submitted 2 fights ago by Terrence McKinney. That was about a year and a half ago. However, Terrence McKinney in the first round is very dangerous. Um, so I don't want to hold that against Faresiam. Ziam's only 26 years old. At the time, at the time he was what, 25, 24. So he's a much younger guy, should be improving faster, looked really good in his last fight. I think the striking will be pretty competitive. I think Faresiam could even win some grappling exchanges. So I am going to go with Faresiam to get it done here. Jai Herbert has fought some really good competition as far as Renato Moicano. He fought him and he fought Ilya Taporia. Those were his, the two really good fighters, but that he lost to. But I just think Faresiam's a guy that's just, like I said, improving quickly, and a guy that, in a few years is going to be a real prospect to look out for. So give me Faresiam to win. Next is Andre Muniz and Paul Craig. I've been waiting to talk about this one for a while. If Paul Craig wins this, I'm going with Andre Muniz. If Paul Craig wins this fight, man, this sport is just like, this sport is so unpredictable. If Paul Craig wins this fight, Andre Muniz should be the better grappler. He should be the better striker. He should probably have. I don't know. I mean, Muniz doesn't have amazing durability, but I mean, Paul Craig's dropping 20 pounds from 205 to 185. How is his durability going to look? How is his cardio going to look? I think Andre Muniz should win this fight. The only concern I have with Muniz is if he decides I'm going to play the grappling game, although his grappling should be better, if he plays the grappling game with Paul Craig, it's always dangerous because Craig can submit anyone. So I plead of you, Andre Muniz, if you're going to grapple with Paul Craig, just, understand that this guy is very dangerous. And I wouldn't, if I was Andre Muniz, I wouldn't even grapple with Paul Craig because I think Muniz probably could find a knockout. As crazy as it sounds, not like Muniz is some great striker, but Paul Craig is dropping 20 pounds and Paul Craig's striking sucked at 205. So how's it going to look at 185 against a guy like Andre Muniz? I think if Muniz keeps us on the feet, he can probably just win by knockout or even win over 3. So Muniz, this is such a winnable fight for you. Do not lose to Paul Craig. That's all I'm going to say. Do not lose to Paul Craig. If he gets submitted by Paul Craig, it would just be another classic example of MMA. It really would. It would be the perfect example of MMA being the most unpredictable sport in existence. But from what I've seen, I think most of us can agree here that Muniz is the better, more well-rounded fighter. It's just Craig has, a very real possibility off his back. Besides that, I don't think he has much of a shot here, so I'm going to go with Muniz for that reason. Plus, Muniz submitted Jacare Souza. So, if regarding jiu-jitsu, Andre Muniz has very good jiu-jitsu. Anyone that can break Jacare's arm, yeah, that's real high level jiu-jitsu right there. So, give me Andre Muniz to win. In the featured fight, we have Nathaniel Wood taking on Andre Fili. Um, I'm going to go with Nathaniel Wood here. I think Andre Fili, he just hasn't really, as far as when you've seen him fight a lot of these prospects, he doesn't seem to beat the prospects. He does have a split decision win over Jourdain, another split decision win over Bill Algeo, but I mean, lost in 40 seconds to Joe Anderson Brito, who's got power, but it's a 40-second loss. Um, Lost to Bryce Mitchell, lost to Sadiq Youssef, lost back in the day to Michael Johnson, lost to Calvin Cater, Yair Rodriguez. Like, it seems like a lot of these, higher level fighters, a lot of these top 15 level guys, Andre Fili, it seems like he's not beating them. So I think this is a test for Nathaniel Wood, the prospect. If he's 29 years old. If Nathaniel Wood, he was a former bantamweight, by the way, lost twice at bantamweight, moved up, and is 2-0 at featherweight. I think if Nathaniel Wood wins this fight, he'll probably get a ranked opponent next. And this is uh, in London. This is should be a coming out party for Nathaniel Wood. This should be a fight where he goes out there and takes care of business, beats Andre Fili, outstrikes him, possibly finds the knockout. But I would say it'll probably go the distance just because um, I don't think Nathaniel Wood's the most powerful guy out there, but he is very good striking. He's got quick hands, good kicks. I think he's a very good striker. And I do think this is, like I said, I think this is a coming out party for him. I think if you lose to Andre Fili, maybe he won't. If you lose to Andre Fili, you're probably not going to be that top, at least like top 15, top 10 level. You're probably not going to get to those, good ranked opponents. But if you do beat Andre Fili, you're on to bigger and better things. And I do think Nathaniel Wood, this is time to shine here. So I'm going to go with Nathaniel Wood. I do like his game. Looked really good against Charles Rosa. Beat him up badly. Couldn't find the finish there, but you know, did destroy him. And then he beats Charles Jourdain as well. So yeah, I do like Nathaniel Wood to get this one done. Co-main event is Molly McCann and Julia Stoliarenko. This fight is crazy that it's a co-main event. I understand there's hype behind Molly and she's Barstool and this and that and Molly and Patty, even though Patty's not even on the card, but I know like the Molly and Patty show has to go on for some reason, even though Patty got exposed by Jared Gordon and he is calling out he called out, like, who did he call out? Josh Emmett. um like he was saying Josh Emmett was terrible. Like, dude, I'm tired of hearing about Patty Pimblett. Just feed Patty Pimblett to anybody good and let him get starched so we never have to hear him again. But for Molly McCann, she's fighting arguably one of the worst fighters on the entire roster in Stoliarenko, and she's only a minus 200 favorite. So people actually think Stoliarenko might beat Molly McCann. Um, if she doesn't win by armbar, I mean, how is Stoliarenko going to win? I think Molly McCann probably knows that. I think Molly McCann's going to win this fight. I think this is a setup fight for McCann. I think Molly's only chance of losing this fight is if she gets somehow armbarred, which is not out of the realm of possibility, just because it's like she's been out grappled before. But if you look at her submission losses, they were to Erin Blanchfield and I believe Jillian Robertson. Let me check that for you guys. Uh, Two submission losses on her record: Jillian Robertson and Erin Blanchfield, and then lost to Laura Fritzen, lost to Talia Santos, but she's not getting, submitted by cans. Jillian Robertson, one of the best submission grapplers in women's MMA, and Erin Blanchfield. In my opinion, Erin Blanchfield is probably the best submission grappler, or at least I think Erin Blanchfield is the best grappler in women's MMA, just in terms of like just I think Erin Blanchfield's a beast. So no shame there. Well, she did get destroyed by Blanchfield, but I don't think Julia Stoyarenko's on that level. Molly McCann, this is a setup fight for her to find a highlight reel knockout or just have a great performance in London in front of a crowd that's going to be cheering her on, a crowd that's going to be going crazy for her. I think she feeds off the energy really well in these situations. And I think Molly McCann will find a finish against Stoyarenko, who's not UFC level, 1-4 in her last five. That one win being against Jessica Rose Clark, losing to Chelsea Chandler, who, if you guys remember, that Chelsea Chandler fight was, I can't believe I picked Chelsea Chandler. That was probably one of my worst picks ever. She turned and ran away. I've never in my life seen that in MMA. Chelsea Chandler turned around and ran headfirst into the cage against Norma Dumont. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, not even like turned around and like kind of like tried to like shuffle away, like turned around and ran full speed headfirst into the cage. And Julia Stoyarenko lost to her by ground and pound. So just a terrible look. Alexis Davis, Julia Avila, and Yana Santos lost to all three of them as well. You got to go with Molly McCann. Come on. And then in the main event, Tom Aspinall and Marcin Tybura. You guys know who I'm going with. As long as Tom Aspinall is completely healthy, as long as he's 100%, he's going to win this fight. Tom Aspinall is just a better fighter than Marcin Tybura. He's better everywhere. Tybura's 37, Aspinall's 30. Aspinall's a better grappler. He's a better striker. He's better everywhere. And he's going to find a finish here. I'm not going to go too in depth here because everyone's picking the side of Aspinall, and there's a reason he's a minus 475 favorite. There's a reason he's a huge favorite because he's much better, and he will win this fight as long as he doesn't get hurt, which I pray he doesn't because he is, like I said, a possible future champion. I think if Aspinall's healthy and he's good to go, I think he steamrolls Tybura. I think he either finds an early knockout or an early submission, whichever one. Um, Tom Aspinall is just, he's just that. I know Marcin Tybura, has a lot of experience. He's not a can. He's definitely not a can. He's beaten some decent opponents, but this isn't. This is Tom Aspinall. This is a different level. Tom Aspinall made Volkov look easy, and I mean made him look easy. So I think it'll be the same for a guy like Tybura. So give me Tom Aspinall in the main event. 15 fights on this card. UFC Fight Night, Aspinall and Tybura. Pretty good card. A lot of interesting ones. Next week is even better. The Gaethje and Poirier card. That's going to be an awesome one. But thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.